Billions of people living out their lives, oblivious.
Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
There's something wrong. There's something wrong. You don't know what it is. You don't know what it's there. Like a splinter, driving you mad.
Bring the ship up to broadcast depth. We're going in. Taking Neo to see her.
See who? The Oracle.
Buckle your seatbelts and place your tray tables in their upright positions. We're going in to explore some more interesting topics in this episode. Welcome aboard, everybody. We're happy you could join us. In today's episode, we're going to interview Tony Barton of Houston Ghost Research. Their website is houstonghost.com. We'll talk about how he got involved in the paranormal field in general and how his group approaches a topic called spirit remediation. Didn't you say you initially had an encounter in a garage, or you want to go back further than that?
Probably go back a little further than that. Just to a small background. I mean, we were already, big fans of the genre, so to speak. I mean, Kim and I watched everything that was on paranormal-wise all the time, and I think it falls into that category. That's really cool, but that, of course, that never happened to me. And as things did start happening around the house, I think at first, but we were both blowing it off. In that same vein that some of those shows do, the first thing you do is disprove it. So everything that did happen, we were on the lines of, oh, that's just a settling noise, or oh, that's just this, oh, that's just that. Nothing's really happening. And I think it just kind of took a couple of things to happen that really jarred my my sense of reality as far as what was really going on in the house. We had a couple of instances where things were moved. One of them being one night I was just sitting around the house, bored, started cleaning the bathroom as a good husband would do, of course. Since my wife works night shift, it was kind of late. So went to the bathroom, and I'm not OCD by any means, but I've got a little bit of a military background, so I'm a little, let's say, studious in how I do things. I'm very, I do things a certain way, very organized. So the first thing I did was organize the bathroom for cleaning. I moved some stuff to one side. We have a long vanity, moved everything to one end of the long vanity, set everything up. So all I had to do was get the cleaning materials, go back in, clean everything with those couple little corners, and then move the other stuff back and clean. I walk out for a minute to grab the two of the cleaning stuff. I come back in there, and there's a big can of hairspray sitting right smack in the middle of the vanity. When I know good and well that A, I didn't leave it there, and B, there's nobody else in the house. And that will rattle you, just to say the least. I had another experience actually driving in the car. I was on the way home from work. I'm on the south side of Houston. I'm on the 610 loop, which, if you've ever driven that area, you know it's busy. It's not to be played around with. I'm fidgeting with my radio, and all of a sudden, something, for lack of a better way to explain it, knees me in the back. And it wasn't just a nudge to where I went, did something just touch me? It was a full force. I went forward in the seat with my shoulders back, like they were being held back. It's like somebody had come up behind me and mashed their knee into my back and lunged my body forward. The only thing I can figure is it got my attention on the road because a car swerved right in front of me very shortly after that. But unsettling nonetheless.
Yeah, no doubt.
I think from there it started escalating a little bit, but that got me to basically question that, hey, maybe there's something really going on here. So one evening, we're sitting around the house. I looked at my wife and just asked her if she had seen anything strange going on in the house, and immediately the look on her face told me that she'd been experiencing some things too. So we got to talking about it, and that's where we basically came to conclusion that we needed to get somebody involved. As far as getting in with HGR, I mean, we'll hand that one to James. He's great with setting up your search engine because we called the first people that popped up on Google.
Yeah. That helps when you're an IT manager.
Yeah, that's true. Once they got in, we started through the process, filled out the paperwork, got everything going. We got you guys out to the house, and it's been a roller coaster ride from there, because it turned out that was only the beginning of everything that was going on in my house.
So let's talk a little bit about the interview process that we use for the group. That's paramount. That's how we weed out in our group the cases we should take and the cases we don't. So what, as you initially went through that paperwork and you did the initial interview, I think with me, can you describe a little bit about what that's like, what that was like for you, and then what we look for now in clients as they go through the interview process too?
Yeah. Well, one, I think just the process itself is going to help keep away the ones that are just, I heard a bump at night, I want somebody out here. Because, of course, having all these shows on TV is going to generate that. If it didn't, there wouldn't be 150 groups out there running around doing little shows all the time. So there's plenty of people calling on any little thing. So I appreciate the extra work we had to go through to get to it. I think that helped weed out some of the stuff. There was a conversation involved in certain things to make sure that it wasn't something that we could explain away, that there was in fact something going on. Getting as much information as possible. A lot of the questions would help set up if it was something else causing the noises or anything else like that. So that it helps weed out the you don't ever want to say fakers, because if they believe there's something going on, there's something going on. But it helps weed out us getting everybody together, because this is something we do on our free time. So it helps getting everybody get together to go out there to find out that they have a bad water hammer that's rattling a pipe every time they flush the commode, and they think that it's their great grandma trying to tell them something.
Right.
When in fact it was their dinner.
Yeah, that seems funny, but that's really, that really is a problem.
And very frequently, and part of the success of, like, we'll say the Ghost Hunter show or whatever, they go in and the first thing they do is go from the point of the skeptic, and they find many issues like that where that's all it was. So weeding that out, I think, was important. Also, it's, if you're going to go through the process and fill out all that paperwork and go through everything else, chances are there really is something going on. It's not just hey, is there something here? I think the fact that we tend to gravitate towards more serious cases as well, I think the events that are happening tend to shy away from the necessity to go out to the house with 100 pieces of scientific equipment to try to prove that it's something else. I mean, there is definitely something going on there.
So you went through the interview process, and it's pretty extensive. It's a long form, and then we always call the client and go through the form and try to fish more information out to see if there's any other contributing factors in our interview process. Then the day we actually showed up, can you give a walkthrough of what that was like?
Well, the primary thing is we're still doing then what we tend to do today. One person comes in and manages the interview, kind of keeps everybody centralized in one location of the house, and then the designated medium that comes in blind, or 2 or 3. I think we had 3 going that day in our house. We'll walk through and get a reading on our spot. They don't have any of the information. We had gone through, like I said, a pretty extensive interview process, so they had James had quite a list of everything we'd seen in the house, from the shadows to the play with the lights to the stuff moving around to me seeing a figure in a window, different things like that. So they knew, the mediums didn't know, but James knew that was all going on. And then we spoke about that again, went over everything to make sure that everything was covered and see if there's anything that had happened in the meantime. And while we were discussing that, they were walking the house. And then afterwards, they sat down, and then we went over their findings. And those pretty much lined up. I mean, everything lined up with having family members coming to visit us for something. I think one of them implied that there was going to be somebody in the house with an extended illness, which came about 2 weeks later. And a couple other things that came around that seemed to tie right in. And we also found out about a prior issue from previous owners that had generated a bit of a problem in the house that we needed to address, which, like I said, started the whole roller coaster with that house.
So, I think it's important to note that as the other mediums, and this is standard procedure on how we operate, we try to go in with multiple mediums that are all blind. The case manager or the interviewer collects all the data on a new client beforehand, and then we go in with mediums that don't know anything about the case. So the mediums operate independently, and then we sit down and sort of have a debriefing with the client, which is exactly what we did in your particular case, and we compare notes between the story that the client initially gives us and what the mediums are picking up, and try to piece all those pieces together. And typically we make a decision between, are we going to try to recommend that the client, assuming that there actually is a spirit in the house, and that's what, or multiple spirits, that's what the mediums pick up on. We try to make a decision between whether we recommend that the clients cohabitate or if they need to go through our process to reclaim their space. And I think in your particular case, we definitely recommended, since it was primarily family, that you cohabitate, but you had a situation in the back bedroom where the mediums picked up on the fact that there were spirits in I really don't like using the term spirits because they're just people. Yep. There were people that were stuck in the back bedroom, and that was where a lot of your activity was coming from. So you're obviously one of the experts in the group that handles this now, but can you walk through the recommendations on how we coached you to handle that situation with the back bedroom in your house?
Well, that particular one, because there wasn't anything ominous there. It was, what did we come to find out, and we verified this with some friends of the old owners, was that the previous owners had a niece that had been playing in that back bedroom with Ouija boards and had apparently opened some kind of portal or had invited something in to talk to, and they were stuck in that room. Well, when they caught her playing with the Ouija board, they freaked out, did whatever with the board, but then called in a priest to basically lock down the house. Well, when he locked down the house, all he did was lock them in that room. So they couldn't get out. They were acting up. They were knocking on the walls. They were rattling the closet door. A lot of those things going on in there. Since we went from an angle of, well, I say we, it was my house, since at the time y'all went from the angle of we're going to do the cohabitation thing because we were comfortable with it. I think the fact that, we had watched so many shows, and I on my own had my own kind of past experiences and my own past that, of course, turned into me being part of the group. But that I was comfortable with that. Then we went from a process of, okay, let's set ground rules. We basically invited them to leave as being the owner of the house. We invite you to leave, open the door. Anybody who wants to leave now can leave. But if you stay, this is my house. You will live by my rules. And if you don't, then we're going to go with, some different methods. So that worked for the time being. Until that 2 weeks came around and we wound up taking in an elderly person with an extended illness. And so we had not only the ones that were staying in the room that was now the bedroom that they were using and they were acting up in, but we had his family, his prior deceased family, coming to visit him because he was nearing the end of his life. So that house got really full real quick.
That's about the time that you started coming into your own, as you and I were talking, and you started going through some of the literature that I'd sent you, most of which was the holographic universe stuff. You started coming into your own from a medium perspective, and you guys actually saw full on a couple of spirits or people in a couple of incidents.
Yes.
So can you elaborate on those?
Well, we had one instance where one that was identified as the elderly gentleman's uncle popped out of a wall, waved, and said howdy. So that was a little bit rattling. We had him appear again as a little boy to him when there was nobody else in the house. What else? There was a couple of others. It's been a little while now since I've been doing this, but
so let's back up a little bit.
It escalated basically after the visit.
So let's back up a little bit and talk a little bit about, that's pretty significant. You and I sort of take that for granted, but what were the circumstances behind the guy, or the family member popping out of the wall and going, howdy? What was that all about? And what were you guys doing? Or obviously you weren't
just sitting in there. He was just sitting in there. My mother-in-law was sitting there minding her own business. And she was the skeptic of everything that was going on, despite all the stuff that was happening that was completely unexplainable any other way. She was a skeptic, and then to have that do to her pretty much tightened her up. And then, of course, I had one night that I woke up and there's a person standing on either side of my bed. I wake up to see one standing over me, so I roll over, said, oh, here we go. I roll over, and there's another one on the other side of the bed staring at me. So they're talking back and forth. That was a little bit. I knew somewhere that they weren't there to mess with me. They weren't there to harm me. Shouldn't be any big deal. So I just whatever and went back to sleep. But it was a definite. They were definitely there, and I was able to very vividly describe what they looked like. And they matched pictures. They tracked the family members down and matched the pictures to the T.
So that was something I actually didn't, maybe I never picked up on the details of the guy popping out of the wall and going howdy. That was actually something that your mother-in-law saw. That wasn't something that you saw. She saw that.
She saw that.
And she was the one that was poo-pooing the whole situation, going, no, there's nothing going on here. She saw that.
Right. In that same vein, I had to have something that I just flat out couldn't explain to finally admit there was something going on in my house. I think that definitely sealed it for her.
So what was her, I remember having early conversations with her, and she very politely said something along the lines of, you guys don't know what you're doing, or this is all crap, or whatever, you know, and I kind of went, oh, that's nice. Did she have an attitude shift after she saw that, or did she just go into denial?
A little bit of both. There was some denial there for a little bit. She had the same thing that I had as well. I mean, I came from a small, deep East Texas town, very religious upbringing, and you did not talk about that stuff. You didn't talk about it. You didn't acknowledge it. If it wasn't specifically from the Bible, it was the devil. So don't mess with it.
Right.
So she kind of had that. You know, she's from Alabama. Southern Alabama. She's from a very, very strict church, and pretty much had the same thing going. See, that was not right.
So she recognized that person as a family member, though, right?
She recognized. She knew exactly who it was when it happened.
Wow. So I think the next really significant part of your story is when your father-in-law, it was both your mother-in-law and your father-in-law were staying with you guys, and you had an experience where you woke up in bed, as I understand, and you can tell the story better than I can, and they had, you basically overheard a conversation or of the two spirits talking, and they had something specific to say that led into separate events. Can you jump into that?
Are we talking about the soul collector one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was so much, there was something leading me into that all night long. This was one thing that happened after y'all came was that everything escalated. We had now fully admitted there was something going on, and not only that, we had acknowledged
and that's very typical.
Was going on.
That's very typical of clients, and that's one of the first things we tell them is, look, now that we've been out and we've interacted with the folks that are here in your house, that activity is very likely to spike, and you guys experience that directly.
Very much so.
Yeah. Oh, I remember a couple of phone calls with your wife, and she was a little panicked.
Yeah, it was getting a little too active in there. We were still trying the cohabitation thing, but and we invited the ones that were stuck in that room to leave, but the ones that stayed were getting a little restless. There was constant rattling the closet door and doing all kinds of other things. And the family members that were hanging out were just appearing more and more. A lot of stuff going on. There was just a constant cloud in that house. Even though we didn't ever feel threatened at all, it was just, it was like having a house full of kids almost.
Right. I remember,
never quiet, always noisy.
One of the turning points for your wife, and she was sort of halfway skeptical. Obviously, she couldn't deny what she was seeing and what she was experiencing. But I remember she told me specifically she was lying in bed one night and the door on your bedroom door just opened all by itself.
Well, we sat there, and I wish at the time we'd had better technology because we had iPhone 3s at the time. If we would have had the 3S or the 4s, we would have had video. And we were actually sitting there in the bedroom, and the bathroom door was opening and closing on command. We'd say, okay, now open it. And it would open up. It's like, okay, now close it. And it would close. And it was literally going by just on command.
Right.
We had a door open. It opened once. I think what started was it opened on me while I was in the shower.
Right. Yeah.
Which was not cool.
Yeah.
Not while I'm naked. But yeah, I think she got something rushed up in her face while she was sleeping, and that was getting a little unsettling. It was, like I said, it was like a house full of kids or little animals or whatever that weren't trained well or something, if you want to use that analogy. It was just never quiet in the house. It was getting too active. And I went to bed one night, and during the course of the night, at 2 or 3 different times, something was getting pushed on me, the term soul collector or harvester. Don't know where it came from, completely out of the blue. So what is that? And to the point that I'm going to have to look that up in the morning. This keeps hitting me. I keep waking up to it. Well, then, I guess it was around 3 or 4 in the morning. We wake up to one of my dogs losing her mind, basically, in the living room.
Right.
I mean, barking like somebody had broken the house and was right in front of her, and she was about to kill him. So I come flying out of the bed, and the first thing out of my mouth was "Soul Collector's here," because it's even what I heard as I woke up.
And that just it came out of your mouth. You had no idea what that was.
No idea what it meant. No idea what it was. Even my wife was held back by it. And I got up, and I said, stay in bed. I didn't grab the gun. I didn't do anything. It's like I knew, even though the dog was losing her mind, like there was somebody in the house, I knew there was nothing.
It wasn't that kind of threat. Yeah.
It wasn't that kind of threat at all. So I don't walk around the house. I walk out in the room, and she quiets down as soon as she sees me. But there's this strange feeling in the house, like a static. I can't really explain.
The atmosphere was charged.
Very charged. So everything was clear. We go back to bed. We wake up the next morning. We ask my in-laws, what'd you think about the dog losing her mind last night? Sorry if she woke you up. And they're both light sleepers. She said, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. And you got big dogs. You don't have little yappers. You've got big dogs.
Big dogs. And they have big bark. You do hear it. And I'd sleep dead, and she woke me up.
Right.
So they didn't hear it. Not only that, dogs were barking all over the neighborhood. And we got to asking our neighbors. Nobody heard a single thing.
As you got up out of bed, I remember you telling this story. And maybe you mentioned it just now. I didn't pick up on it, but as you walked out of your bedroom, what were the dogs doing?
They were just up. They were up. They were alert, but they weren't focused on any one spot.
Gotcha.
Right. And then I think as we kind of keep going back and revisit, I had this underlying sense that was saying, don't look up.
Okay.
But it was that weird static charge in the air that was really strange. Then we got up the next morning, and the house was clear.
You said it was clear. Can you explain what you meant by clear?
Well, say you're a parent, you got 3 or 4 kids, and the house is just busy all the time. There's always something going on. It's always loud. always activity happening. The house is never quiet.
Right.
Now imagine you got up the first day after all those kids went to summer camp and walked around the house. And it was quiet. It was clear. The entire feeling around the house was almost like it had been ionized in a sense.
Right.
Somebody came through with an ionizer, like when they do for the odor, to get rid of odors and things like that. There was still a charge in the air, but it was different.
Right.
And the house was quiet.
So, maybe it's appropriate at this point to sort of fast forward to a couple of days before your father-in-law passed, because activity had spiked up before that. So, can you give us an idea of what you remember and what happened before, right before he passed?
Let me think here a second. I've had so many going on. Well, the bad ones that came in afterwards.
Right.
See, if I were a Hollywood executive, I could make my story into a trilogy. That's funny. It was right when it was getting bad again. I had already had something come up behind me when I was out in the yard and say something about it's very soon. And it felt in regards to him. The increasing in activity with his family had come back. His mom and his sister and his uncle were back again. I believe my wife saw him. My mother-in-law saw him. He saw him. And it was just, everything was building up. I think he sensed it too, because that weekend before, he started making his amends with everybody that he felt he needed to.
Right.
So I think he had a sense of it as well.
What played out as he passed and after he passed? How did that play out?
The biggest thing after he passed was in the ER when we were in the emergency room, and I actually felt him standing behind me while I'm standing there looking at his body laying on the table, and then felt something touch my shoulder. I get to put his hand on my shoulder. It was just a different experience. And I think maybe all of that happened and it kind of awakened something in me where I was picking up on things that I had put away a long time ago.
Okay, so that gives folks a good start into how you got into the group. One of our primary reading materials and where we start everybody is holographic theory, to give us a good idea, or new people coming in, a good idea that our approach is based in science, and that you can still have a spiritual approach and have it based in science. So as you were going through that material initially, what about it spoke to you, and what did you take away from that?
Well, I think one of the first things I said to you after I read it was I had been waiting on something to tell me that for a long time, because I basically already knew it somewhere deep down.
Right.
It's like, when I read it, it was kind of like one of those, well, duh moments, because I had sensed that before. I had been on sort of my own, comparative mythology quest, so to speak, coming out of that strict upbringing that I went through, and then leaving that to go in the military. And then you don't have that strict upbringing anymore, and you've got to find another source of that, and that's no longer available. So you start comparing. And when you see these other religious beliefs or whatever, and they start talking about different things, and how does that stack up versus what I believe, then it started on sort of a vision quest of sorts. And it basically made me come to the realization that there probably is something out there. It's, I actually heard on a sci-fi show that summed it up perfectly. I don't know if they were trying for that, but I think they were, in a sense, making a speech about it. And it made a comment that we're all looking through the kaleidoscope. You see something different. Everybody sees something different, but it's the same light behind it.
Right. That's one of my favorite quotes too. It may have been me that told you that. I'm not sure, but I use that a lot too.
It's actually from Babylon 5.
Was it? Yeah. Where I got it from was, I don't remember the guy who actually said it, but religion and spirituality is
like God as a candle and spirit as a candle burning bright in a lantern. And it's a multicolored lantern, and, you know, everybody's looking in through their own separate lens, but it's the same light inside. You know, it's just a different interpretation of the same sort of information, which is, I really got deep into that, through Joseph Campbell's work and comparative mythology and all that sort of stuff. So, you're actually in a leadership role now in the group. And you actually take over now in the last couple of weeks, you've taken over most of the direction of the active investigations that we run. And one of the reasons why we put you in charge of the group is because you've got a really good grasp on being able to approach the client from their perspective and engaging their belief systems. So can you talk a little bit about how our approach maybe differs from what you've seen other groups approach, and why we do it the way we do it?
You sure you want to keep this to an hour?
I could always split it up.
I'm the Cy Sperling of paranormal research. No, we one of the biggest differences I found, and that was what was really profound when y'all came out to my house, was one of the nagging things that I had seen when I was watching all these shows previously and trying to learn something. Because it did pique my interest because of the studies that I've been doing for years. Because I not only got into studying those religions, I got in deep. I went deep into studying the mythology behind them. And say what you will, Christianity is a mythology.
Right.
Just like any others. But studying all those and studying things that are thousands of years old yet share so many like items gave me kind of a unique perspective of that. And knowing that there's something more to this than rattling pipes and things like that. So to watch these shows and see them go in and, of course, string up these thousands of dollars of electrical equipment and walk around all night and then come in and go, well, here's a couple of sound bites. We think it sounds like this. Here's a couple of weird little flashes of light. Yeah, there's probably something here. See ya.
Right.
It's really nice meeting you. And that gnawed on me. I was like, what are you doing about it? If you've seen something that's there, what are you doing about it? You're in these people's houses. For God's sake, they're scared.
Right.
And that was something that really made a difference with me in the fact that you wanted to get to the bottom of it. You wanted to find what the source of it was. You want to deal with it in whatever way that was, whether it was a cohabitation or if it turned into something like, we need you to, we're going to help you clear them out of here in whatever way that was. So by the time we go to the house, we've usually done enough to know that we don't need all the equipment. We've gone through interview process. We've gone through these steps to realize the stuff that's going on, there's something there. And even in the houses or the potential clients that we've screened, and we've started thinking that maybe this isn't something that we would take. Even our mediums have verified that when we've done remote views without even knowing anything about the client. They come back and said, this is nothing. So that even coincides when we use the mediums on a shaky one. The client doesn't need 20 pieces of proof in front of them to go, hey, there's something here. They know there's something here. They're the ones experiencing that. And there's so many times that when I watch those shows, they said, we can recreate it by doing this. And the first thing out of my mouth was, just because you can recreate it, that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Right. You can open a door over and over and over again, but a door opening by itself is a completely different phenomenon.
Right.
So in summation, I think if I were to paraphrase your response, it would be that we sort of go in with the mentality of, we're going to see with our initial process and interview and our initial walkthrough for a client, we try to determine if there's a non-paranormal. That's the first thing you always do. But one of the things that is sort of my pet peeve with other groups who do this work, they may go in and they may be able to gather evidence, but they don't have a remediation plan if they find something. Especially if they find something negative, because they go in, they stir up the pot, they try to establish some sort of communication, and then once they've got the tiger by the tail, they're sort of like, oh crap, what the hell do we do with it?
Mm-hmm.
they really don't have an approach to be able to deal with that stuff, and we've been able to develop an approach.
And nothing against those groups. I mean, there's
Right.
groups out there that they're in it for the fun. There's a thrill to it, and more power to those guys. But stay out of folks' houses. The ones that are getting really scared. I mean, that if you're just going in there to get your rocks off, so to speak,
Right.
then you need to go do that at a graveyard. Don't do that in their house. But don't get in. Don't be afraid. If you think you're in over your head, don't be afraid to call a group like us to
Right.
help you out. And that's where I think some miss the boat. There's something here more than we can do. See ya.
Yeah, and that was sort of one of my pet peeves back when I used to watch those shows. And when I ran around with other groups when I was first getting into this sort of work, they never had a remediation program.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they would look down on people who had some sort of remediation program. They were strictly scientific, and they never could wrap their head around the fact that you could be both scientific and spiritual, and your spiritual approach could be scientific, and that's where the holographic theory comes in. You know, it ties all that stuff together. So we hear a lot of naysayers in other groups who are that strict science approach, and they sort of look down their nose or poo-poo, well, you use psychic mediums. Can you talk a little bit about how valuable that is for us and why we do that?
Well, one of the things is just simple verification that there is something going on. The people have these sensitivities and can pick up on those things, and having somebody with that sensitivity that can garner enough information to pick up what exactly is happening. I mean, we've got names that have verified names, events, other things that there's no possible way they could have known otherwise.
Right.
And then to be able to use that as a source to solve the problem has been invaluable.
Yeah, you're not recording. That's one of the things I like about our approach. You're not recording 8 hours of video to get one EVP or 8 hours of audio to get one EVP. You use a medium and they can tell you exactly where the spirit is,
Right.
providing it's a good medium. And in many cases, we just had a client recently that was in Louisiana, and we don't operate out of Louisiana at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's well outside of our range of service. But we were actually able to service that client completely remotely, both with getting a remote read and trying to figure out what was going on in their house using mediums, and we were able to get them some remediation relief, using remote techniques. That was the first client we'd ever done that with, but that was a good approach. One of the things that you excel at in our approach and with our group is coaching clients through the process of if they can't cohabitate and we can't do some sort of counseling session between the client and the spirits involved to figure out what's actually going on, how we can coach them through the process of reclaiming their own space and pushing out that spirit. So if you could just pretend for a minute that I was one of those clients and you were going to talk me through that process. How does that work? Obviously visualization is a big thing for us. So what's the speech that you go through?
Well, the first thing is kind of an evaluation process first. You want to find out what that person's background is. They have, what type of religious background they have, if any, and where they are as far as, a level of nervousness that they're at, fear. Makes a big impact as far as being able to focus and concentrate. We've had some that rolled right into it. We've had some that were still, even after we laid everything out, showed exactly what everything was and showed them that they could control it, were still so afraid that they couldn't manage the process of taking control of the situation. And that's the big thing we've got to do is train them to manage their situation, because it's their house, it's their domain. So one of the things we'll do at first, before we even get into the process, is a little bit of an education process. Talk about how all these different religions over the course of time, and then some of these civilizations never spoke to each other, never communicated with each other, yet they had the same processes in place They use the same materials to ward off negative entities. They believed in many of the same things. There's something to that.
Right.
When they don't control. And the belief process is the most important thing, and that's what we've got to really drive home, and that it works because they believed it worked.
Right. And one of my favorite things that I tell clients when I'm giving that speech to them is it really doesn't matter what the process is. It doesn't matter what the ritual is.
Mm-hmm.
There are some components that do matter, but the most important component is that you believe and you start to buy into the concept that this is your space. You have a right to be there. They don't have a right to be there. And you use that belief system to leverage the situation to be able to push them out. I like telling clients, it doesn't matter if you run around the house with a sage stick or you run around the house and beat the walls with a rubber chicken. As long as you believe that beating the walls with a rubber chicken is what's going to help you resolve that situation, that's what empowers you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then so we want to give examples to drive home that this has a definite potential for working. I'm not about to just stand up and do something silly, have you do something silly, and it's going to go away.
Right.
We explain the process, completely honest about the process, and that the tools like the sage are merely that. They're tools while you are building up your belief process. Things across time, civilizations have shown that this stuff works. It emits a frequency that is uncomfortable to the entities living at that frequency, and it drives them out temporarily. The thing is, it helps you build up your processes and your beliefs in the meantime to get to that point where you don't need the sage anymore. So it's an effective tool to get you to that point. But we drive that stuff home so that we make sure they understand that we're not just showing them something that would make them feel happy for a little bit and then we're out the door. This is, and one of the biggest things as well is to let them know that this is probably not going to be a one-time thing.
Right.
You may get lucky. It may be something that says, okay, I'm out of here.
Right.
But one of the things that I tell them is that every single religion across the board has whatever that higher power is, has given man dominion over the spirit world.
Right.
That's every single religion. So there's something to that. So we have that dominion. Now there's nothing saying that they can't challenge it.
Right.
And therein lies the rub. So
Right.
you have to have that belief behind you. And if that belief is not there and not strong yet, then they can stand their ground for a bit and challenge that. So that's part of the process too, is building that up so they can't resist that anymore. So they're going to go. They may come back to challenge it. And that's where we got to make them understand that this is not a one-time deal, that they may come back. So don't think you failed and it's pointless. Do it again.
Right.
And then do it stronger. Get mad. I'm also not afraid to tell them, use anger as your friend on this. They're invading your house. They're messing with your children. They're violating your space, and they've got to go. Get angry, get mad, because then it can help you focus your rage, I guess if you want to call it that, into something and help you with the focusing aspect of it. And that ties back to the holographic theory, in that we have some kind of control over our reality around us, more so than we realize.
Yeah, absolutely. So we, to sort of sum it up, we give the client a foundation in the first order of business is to prove to them that we have, in this reality or this level of reality, we have dominion over spirit, and you have the authority. And that's one of the things I talk about extensively in my book, Help, I'm Haunted, on Kindle, is you have the authority. You've been granted the authority to reclaim your space and reclaim dominion. So once you reclaim that authority, they're going to challenge it. But, just like you're working with, training a dog or training an animal, you have to reinforce that. Or a kid, you have to reinforce that over and over and over again. More often than not, they'll push back and things will get crazy after we leave. And they'll go into a panic. The client will go, holy crap, something happened and it's working, but now they're back in. So one of the other important aspects to our approach is that it's an ongoing coaching process. We make it very clear, like you said, that it's not a one-time deal. and that there are going to be multiple times where we have to get on the phone and talk them down out of a panic mode sometimes, and get them to reestablish that that belief system.
And I think I can help that being the fact that I went through it myself.
Yes.
That I had to go through multiple cleansings, and it's gotten me to the point that I don't need the sage anymore.
Right. That's one of the important components. Once you can step back and you can see the whole process, now that you've gotten to the point where you don't need the sage, you've got the radar, you can lock onto the spirit and push them out and then declare your own boundaries. You don't need that anymore. But now, when you do pick up a sage stick, it's a whole different ballgame, because your belief system has allowed you to much more effectively leverage your authority through a tool like that. So let's walk through the initial visualization. It's really important that you don't just give a client a sage stick, that's sort of our level 1 cleansing protocol, is we teach them how to sage. And there's a specific methodology that we use, and it's very important to engage visualization when you do that. So you've got a really good speech for that. Can you walk us through that?
Well, one of the things is I'll explain the process at first, just to get them kind of organized to expect what we're going to do. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick one side of the house or the center of the house, whatever's comfortable for them. And we're going to start from there, and we're going to cover the whole house. Another thing that I make very clear to them is there's no wrong way to do this.
Right.
And you do not look stupid.
Right. Yeah.
Do not worry about how you look, how you feel. You do it the way that is comfortable for you to make it work, to make the visualization work. Because only in that comfort level is only going to make you stronger. So we'll start from that one spot, and then from that, number one, they're going to turn on the old imagination process they had as a kid.
Right.
They get to imagine for a little bit and have a little fun with it. And then 2, they've got to focus in. They've got to really center themselves, calm down. And in many cases, I mean, we've been in these houses, these people are afraid.
Right.
And they have been living in fear for some time before they found us. So that can be a little bit easier said than done for some of these folks. So we've had to wait 15, 20 minutes or so before we started the process, just to give them time to kind of find their focus. And we've used suggested imagery before to lay back in a chair and imagine these clouds, visualize these clouds in the air, and just give them some sort of peaceful scenery to focus in on to find that center. Once you found that center and you started the visualization process, that's when you can turn the anger into that focus.
Right.
And really blast it out. But you've got to get that center focus first. So that part, aside from the initial explanation part, tends to take the longest. And you can sense it in them. When they find it, you can sense it in them. There's a definite different feeling that comes off of them when they find that center, and the anxiousness comes off of them a little bit, and they're ready to go. And they're getting the idea that we're going to be there with them. We're going to be right beside them. They don't look stupid.
Right.
That's one thing that I hammer home to them. You're not going to look ridiculous doing this. Don't worry about how you look.
Or if you are going to look ridiculous, we're going to look ridiculous with you.
Right there with you. And I may egg you on to look even more ridiculous. But once we have that calmness in place, then it's a matter of the way that I like to explain it is you're going to visualize the sky in a sense. And you're going to visualize this light, and you can do it as clouds or as light or whatever, to start to turn around you over in the sky. And and that light is the light of God or Allah or whatever your religious preference happens to be. That is His power. That is His light. And it's going to basically funnel in and build up to the point where it comes down, and it's going to come into you. And you're going to focus in on making yourself, a term that we like to use a lot. It's a clear and perfect channel. Imagine yourself basically as a prism, that this light is going to build inside of you to the point that it's just going to explode out. But you're going to focus it through that sage stick and out through the smoke.
Right.
So the visualization becomes, once you're ready to go, you light that sage stick, that light is firing out of you as that smoke coming out of the sage stick. So as you move that sage stick around and you have the visual smoke, then as that smoke fills the room, you are visualizing that light filling the room. And as that light is filling the room, it's pushing whatever entity's out, along with the sage, which is working right now to strengthen that and working to do the job as you build that belief process. So you find your center of the house or that one corner of the room. You start with that room and you permeate everything. You make sure that smoke goes everywhere. And the whole time, anywhere that smoke goes, it's that light coming out of you as the smoke, and it's cleansing the house. And you do this in every room of the house, in the attic. And if it has a basement, do the basement. We don't really do basements down here, but if you have a basement, you go down to the basement. If you need to go out in the yard, if you have a cabana or a big dollhouse for your kids out there and you feel you need to do it, do it. Use that, get that all the way done where all the house is covered. And you keep visualizing that this house is full of that light. Now, during that time, you can say or do whatever's comfortable for you based on your religion. We've had some that were quiet and just concentrated on that and said, get out. We've had some that carried a Bible with them and quoted Bible verses the whole time, and that was quite a powerful event.
Yeah.
When we saw that. Some have taken our cue and gotten really mad, and we'll stand right behind you and goad you.
Right.
Because that anger, you would be surprised what you can focus through that anger.
Yeah. Anger is emotional energy,
Yes.
whether you use it for good or bad, and a parent protecting their child from a bully, that's anger, and that's powerful anger. That's powerful emotional energy. The one thing I wanted to point out as you're channeling this light, we don't usually say this to a client, but that light becomes the symbol of your authority over that house. So you want to saturate the house with that light as a symbol of your authority to help you reclaim that space.
And then with the goal being, as you do this again and again, then you don't need the sage to do that. Or maybe you don't need to light the sage. You can just have it in your hand and see that light going out to fill the house. Then that can graduate into, you can visualize the light filling the house on your own without even moving around.
Right.
Which can graduate into building a bubble around your house, and anytime you think about it, boom.
Right.
The house is clear.
You give the client, we do that with a lot of clients. We give them, especially if they're having a hard time keeping a particularly stubborn entity out of the house, we have them visualize that light into a bubble around their house that they program the bubble, just like you would program, a computer program or something along those lines, that nobody can enter into the house without their permission. And as soon as somebody in the house becomes aware that something has walked through the bubble grabs them and ejects them immediately. That's a really powerful visualization.
We've even had them draw pictures around the house with a bubble around it.
Right.
To hang up around the house. So when they see it, they think about that, they can reinforce it.
Right.
Now, one thing I also tell them, there is a caveat to this, is when you're doing this over and over, is you can, from what we can tell, basically turn your house into the equivalent of a porch light at night to moths.
Right. Right.
Whereas the house becomes a beacon, so to speak. They can't get in, but they may come all around it wondering what's going on in that house. So I can't count the times that I've gone for a midnight snack in the fridge or something to drink, and then my back door, which is mostly glass, I start getting taps on it, somebody trying to get my attention.
Right. They can't come in.
They can't come in.
But they're trying to get your attention.
Trying to get my attention.
So as we go through this process for a client, how do we, if they start to falter or they start to lose faith in that system, how do we re-engage their belief system?
I think just a lot of that comes from the simple fact that we've experienced it ourselves. I've been there. We had, even after the third experience I was telling you about that could make the trilogy, happened after we cleansed the house, but yet something got in.
Right.
So, to deal with that, and I think eventually it made me stronger for it.
Right.
but at the same time, it can rattle your belief in that structure and the system. So it's just a matter of listening to them, understanding what they're going through, especially since we've been through it ourselves, and then helping to reinforce that. Now, on that aspect, if it does continue, we have other methods.
Right. So it's important to note that those other methods it's just another smudging method.
Another smudging method. We have even stronger stuff to roll through. They're not coming in with us for a while.
I don't know if this is an appropriate place to interject, but maybe it is. We've even encountered a couple of spirits who were family members. In one particular case, we had an unwanted entity downstairs, and we had a kosher family member, a mother, upstairs. And the mother was talking to us the whole time, and the mother actually said, "Don't light that crap in here because I'll have to leave too." She said that directly to the mediums. So that, in my mind, was a really big reinforcement for the fact that this method and this system works. And numbers don't lie. We've helped literally dozens and dozens of clients with this same method and this same approach, and it's always effective.
Mm-hmm.
To switch gears a little bit, that's how we walk through clients through our particular remediation process. We have an additional process where if that doesn't work, we can step in and we do it for them. But our initial approach, and we feel it's very important that we coach the clients through the process of doing this themselves rather than us stepping up and doing it for them. Can you talk a little bit about why we feel that's important?
Well, that goes back into, as much as we've read and studied into the holographic universe, and without going down a rabbit hole and keeping us here for 2 or 3 hours, there's a big summation of the book is the fact that we have a lot more control over our surroundings and our reality than we realize, and even harnessing a fraction of that on our own can make a world of difference. I can clean that house in a heartbeat, but once I'm gone, I'm no longer there. My control is gone. My authority is gone. My whole thought process about that house is done. So it's right back to theirs.
Right.
So it completely eliminates me from the picture. I can do a temporary fix, but they have to manipulate their surroundings and their reality and their belief structure, which is what manages that. So, it's part of the reason we've gone so in depth in these books, and then taking the scientific aspect of it as well. Holographic theory gets really big into quantum physics. There's a lot of science behind it. If you're not science inclined, it can be a little bit of a tough read, but we've actually found some videos that are very, very good at explaining it and going through everything.
Right. Those are Stephen Davis's videos, Holographic Universe Workshops, plural.com. And we're doing a separate podcast block just on his stuff. He does a really excellent job of breaking down Michael Talbot's original Holographic Universe book and making it much easier for the layman to process and get around or get their mind around those concepts. One of the other things he's done with Talbot's work is he's updated it with a lot of the more recent research, because Talbot's stuff was in the 70s and the 80s, and Stephen Davis has updated all that stuff. So we're actually going to do another interview with him on Sunday to do a follow-up on that. But it's not just the holographic universe stuff that we work through. A lot of the stuff that we work through is Gary Schwartz's stuff, which I hope to be able to do an interview with him sometime soon. And as you read through those books, can you give us an idea of what you took from those, and more importantly, why you feel like they're important to our work and other groups should make that material available?
Well, Gary Schwartz, I think, put a lot of legitimacy on this. As my eyes were open to a lot of this as well, I had a lot of questions. His books tend to put legitimacy to it, for one. I mean, he's done a lot of work with Alison Dubois, with John Edward, who,
right.
A lot of people have thought that John Edward was a hack, that
right.
all those shows were set up, but he put him through some experiments that are quite amazing when you
right.
go on and read it.
Double and even triple blind
right.
studies.
Right.
Yeah.
There was no way whatsoever he could have known the things he knew. There wasn't somebody in the line
Right.
listening to conversations, anything like that could have happened. Also, the different positions he takes on each book, as far as the process that he goes through, I think the God experiments are very important in the fact that it uses science, but at the same time, it still legitimizes that higher entity, higher power in the background, the divine influence and intelligent design that, so much the science field fights over. One of his mentioned experiments just to take from is take some different colored sands or whatever and make a beach scene in the bottom of a bucket.
Right.
And then just shake that bucket once in a while. According to the evolutionary design, eventually it should pop back up to a beach or something similar, but it's never going to do that. Without some kind of intelligent guidance behind it, it's eventually just going to muddle up into a bunch of different colored sand and stay that way.
Right.
It's a basic one. It doesn't disprove the theory, of course, but it gets along those lines. But I think that's important too, as we deal with so many people that come from religious backgrounds, to tell them now we're going to take a scientific approach to it, because it's one of the biggest things with science is, a lot of them are agnostic. There is nothing out there.
Absolutely.
So to have that book, I think, is important to help still establish that. But if you read the afterlife experiments, it is amazing.
Yeah.
The things that he uncovered there through the experiments, and that could be a whole another episode.
Yeah. That's one of the things that really attracts me to Gary Schwartz's work. He's an accredited scientist and researcher. He initially started out his career, as I understand it, with Duke University in the Rhine. The Rhine's no longer associated with Duke University, but that's a prestigious, well-established university. And now he works with the University of Arizona, continuing his work. He was one of the first researchers to initially seriously study mediumship. And he's trying to bridge the gap between what Lori Lee would call woo-woo, science and real science. And there's a place for that, You don't have to be cold-hearted. You don't have to be, I don't want to say unscientific, but you can be both at the same time. You can take a scientific approach, but as you and I were discussing earlier today, the big problem with science doing research in this field is it can't establish an effective control.
Mm-hmm.
You can't put a ghost in a bottle. You can't put a ghost in a test tube and run a spectrograph on it. You have to operate outside of that paradigm.
Well, the science still can't figure out people. And they can put us in a box and go dance, monkey, dance.
Right.
And they still can't figure us out. The entire field of psychology is still theory.
Right.
Absolutely. There's been some good studies about it, but it's still just theory. I'm not going to perform the same way 2 times in a row in a controlled environment. Why should a spirit?
Well, yeah, science can't even fundamentally explain consciousness.
Right.
You ask 10 different experienced, legitimately credentialed scientists to explain consciousness, and you'll get, if you get an answer at all, you'll get 10 completely different answers depending on what their field is.
Right. And the power of words as well. It was one thing that I really got from him in the way that he changed some words around to try to make things a little bit more objective.
Right.
Just in what he did with the word God, to try to take the power of that word out to make it a little bit more objective in the experiments.
Right.
Because there's an instant preconceived belief structure right then and there when you say something, when you say that. In the same aspect, we avoid saying demon or demonic in anything that we do. Right. Because there's so many preconceived things with that. The client would instantly feel, it's mainly because of media,
right,
that there's nothing I can do. I'm helpless in this, when it's not the case. And so, I look at it from the same thing I cringe when I hear somebody say psychic.
Yeah, I do
because of the preconceptions with that word. Even medium, I'm a little bit squirrely about. So, maybe we find a word that goes right. That seems to be the thing nowadays with society. You don't like it, change the word.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I don't like using the term cleansing anymore in this work. I tend to use spiritual remediation. I mean, to some degree, it's a little hokey. It's kind of like calling somebody a waste disposal technician instead of a garbage man. But it deviates from the woo-woo factor,
Right.
you know. Our stuff is actually based on, and our approach really is based on scientific principles, you know, visualization and engaging your belief system. One of the most powerful aspects that we haven't even got into yet with Stephen Davis, his interview, is the power of belief, aka science calls it placebo.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that is one of the most powerful forces on the planet. You know, I just watched a video series on YouTube called The Divine Matrix, and they had Divine Matrix is essentially another word for or another phrase for holographic universe. It's very similar, but in that Divine Matrix video, they showed a clinic in Japan that's literally shrinking tumors before your eyes on video with simply the power of engaging the patient's belief system, curing a tumor, making it disappear directly on the monitor with nothing more than placebo effect. And that effect is completely disregarded in science today. And I think that's one of in the medical industry especially, that's one of the biggest mistakes I think we're making is we're not engaging the patient's belief system sufficiently.
Oh, the placebo effect is noted in the medical field, believe me.
Yeah. But it
if only we knew how many pills we're taking are really sugar pills.
Right, yeah. But they don't take advantage of that. They look at that as well, this thing must not be effective because it's a placebo effect. That doesn't mean it's not effective. If it still does its job, why not do it? Why not use it?
Yeah, and one of the interesting things about that was the placebo followed a specific curve. From when he started taking it, there was a certain amount of where it actually worked. There was like a peak, and then it would valley off as it lost effectiveness.
Right.
The thing is, the actual medication, while there was more response to it, it followed the exact same curve. Why is it losing effectiveness? Because we believe that there's another medication that does better. So now we don't believe this medication works anymore. It's not any different than a sugar pill.
Yeah, and Talbot actually talked about, I think he mentioned something along the lines of, in the U.S., as much of a third of the over-the-counter drugs and medications have a negligible effect when compared with the placebo. So that tells you how effective that is, and that's one of the other stories they get into, where the guy comes into the office. They get into this in Talbot's book. The guy who's got terminal cancer goes into this therapist's office, and the therapist happens to specialize in placebo therapy and working with placebo and doing placebo trials. And he gives this guy a completely fictitious story about this new medication that's coming on the market, and it does wonders for his specific type of cancer. And then he shoots the guy up with this sugar water, essentially, saline, and the guy's tumors, which were the size of grapefruits, dissolved down to absolutely nothing. And then the guy goes out and he reads some research about this supposed drug he took, and then the tumors come back almost overnight.
Once he finds out they're fake.
Right.
So comes back.
Then the guy comes back in to the doctor's office and says, "Okay, I read this stuff is fake, and I need the real stuff." So the guy pretends to give him a super high dose, and he goes through these theatrics in his office, and the guy's tumors melt away again. So it's not that medicine doesn't work. Nobody's saying that. It's that I don't think we're effectively engaging the belief system of people. We don't understand what that is. That's almost a new technology that we're just now starting to.
It's engaging our power to affect what's going on around us. And it's the same method, so to speak, that we use teaching the clients how to cleanse their house.
Absolutely. And it's not to say that that's not effective.
Right.
It works, So I think the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. If we've helped dozens of clients with this stuff, I need to actually sit down at some point and do a case count to see how many families we've been able to deal with this, or we've been able to help with this approach. But there's only one that I can think of that we haven't been able to help, and that was a guy, unfortunately, who had some legitimate mental health issues. He had some spiritual issues as well, but he had some legitimate mental health issues, and he couldn't effectively engage his belief system. I think this information is important, and it's imperative for other groups to be able to see that they can leverage both the spiritual side of the equation and be scientific about it. They're not going to lose credibility.
Right, exactly. And then we can also tell them to feel free to contact us with any questions. I mean, we're happy to go more in depth. I mean, we tried to pinch some of this stuff into an hour. I mean, we've sat in clients' houses and talked for 3 or 4 hours just on one little subject. I mean, we can go for a while on this.
Yeah, that's actually kind of my vision for this group, and in the long term is for us to, as much as we can, move out of the actually going out ourselves and helping clients unless we find people who legitimately need our help, but to try to shift and be a support network for other groups so that we can spread this message and this method around. There's just not enough people out there. There's enough interest in paranormal investigation, and there's enough goodwill, but this information is not out there. You know, they don't know how to engage belief systems, and sadly, once they identify a spirit and they've got the tiger by the tail, they don't know what to do with it.
Plus, it's a lot of work in what's now become an instant gratification society. You know,
right.
And we probably got a good year's worth of reading for you to do.
Yeah. That's probably a little much to the detriment of some of our new recruits. You know, they want to go jump out in the field and get EVPs, and we're like, no, have you read your stuff yet?
Right.
So, and our reading material is up on our website, HoustonGhost.com, and we're constantly revising that list. I think one of the things we probably need to start doing is providing our notes for those books and where it's relevant and where it's not relevant. Because one of the things, and even though Holographic Universe is so important to our work, I think they only mention ghosts and spirits one time in that book, you know, and that's on the back cover, you know, on the jacket. It's not a manual of how to go do this stuff. It's the underpinning logic and the foundation behind why our methods work, you know, and that's important for people to understand.
Well, it's like it's sort of like a doctor, and we're not comparing ourselves to doctors by any means, but it's in that same aspect. You don't just, I see a headache, a doctor doesn't just give you Tylenol because you have a headache, because he understands the whole disease process behind what's going on with you. So that's kind of where we go with the Holographic Universe. It's the whole process behind what we do, and then we can expand from there into the actual paranormal side of it.
Yeah. And fundamentally, I think what this stuff teaches you as you go through the reading material is that reality is not what we understand it. And once you understand that reality is not what you think it is, everything else sort of comes into focus and everything else makes sense.
Right.